Welcome to Home Health 360, a podcast presented by AlayaCare. I'm your host, Jeff Howell, and this is the show about learning from the best in home health care from around the globe. Hi, everyone, and welcome again to Home Health 360, where we speak with leaders in home health from across the globe. First, we have Rosie on today, the CEO of Avivo in Perth, Australia. Avivo supports over 3,000 customers through disability, aged care, and mental health funding. This year was the last year of a transition to the NDIS from previous funders, a massive change that required effort from all of their dedicated 1,200 employees. Avivo has been doing some groundbreaking work. They now have over 100 neighborhood teams, and the amount of work that these teams do in their location increased to an average of 62% of total hours during the last year. This is an adaptation of the Buurtzorg model out of Netherlands. More on that a little bit later. Avivo has also held their first mental health conference with close to 300 employees coming together to develop skills and knowledge in the mental health field, all in a year of a global pandemic. Rosie, did I get all of that right? And welcome to the show.
Yes, thanks very much, Jeff. Yeah, you took that from my pitch with the end of last financial year. And very interesting, isn't it? When you look each year about what's been achieved, and also in these times when the world is very strange with a pandemic. But yeah, you got the heart of it anyway, Jeff. Thank you.
Okay, good. And we have Annette Hilly. For over 2 decades, Annette has helped deliver quality care to elderly and people with disabilities that have boosted their independence and well-being. Now she has the opportunity to work and connect with people with technology so that they can focus on what really matters, delivering better care, creating great places to work, and optimizing operations for home health agencies. Annette has spent 9 years with Baptist Care, a leading not-for-profit organization with more than 3,500 staff and 1,000 volunteers in New South Wales, leaving as Chief Operating Officer in 2020, and has spent almost the last 2 years as General Manager for Australia and New Zealand at AlayaCare, a leading home health software company. Annette, nice to see you, and thanks for calling in from Sydney, Australia.
It's great to be here, Jeff.
So, Rosie, let's go over to you. Give us a little bit more background on where your career has taken you, and let us know a little bit more about Avivo. Where did Avivo come from? What's core to the organization, and what direction are you going in?
Yeah. Wow, where do I start? Help. Look, I've always worked in community and human services. I actually started out as an occupational therapist many years ago in New Zealand. And soon, after my graduating, after working there, I moved to Western Australia. I initially started out in the health or the hospital system, but actually really soon realised that my passion lay in how we support people to live life in community. So I started working within the disability sector very early in my career, working with families, supporting families with supporting them to their development in relation to their children, then moving into adults and so on. So I really feel very committed to how we support people and families to live life in community. And taken on lots of roles, from working in government, then I went into not-for-profits and was involved in starting up a number of new organisations and that supported people with employment. With disabilities. So that was a pretty exciting period, and done a lot of work in quality, how to support organisations to really go beyond expectations rather than just what the standards say. And and then my journey came around about, actually now it's 16, 17 years ago to Avivo when I commenced working there in the executive team, or here. I'm still here, and the roles evolved. So I became the CEO of Avivo about 7 years ago, just as the NDIS was beginning to be established in Australia. So it's been an interesting 7 years.
And for the listeners who have never heard of NDIS, can you give us some background on that?
Yeah, it's the abbreviation for the National Disability Insurance Scheme. And it is internationally groundbreaking because it is a scheme that looks at all people who meet eligibility criteria having access to funding to support them with their goals, meet their needs and to support them with their goals. Very big commitment by the Australian government and all the state governments to ensure that every person that's eligible with a disability can, get access to these resources and have much more choice and control in their own lives and what the supports they use. So that's probably I think that's helpful to getting a brief description of it. Do you think so, Annette?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think probably too, particularly one thing that the NDIS brought forward was it was actually putting the person with the disability in control of their care and, being very much about an individualised and personal model. So the historical model was very much this is what we can give you and this is how it's going to be delivered. This has really turned it on its head. And, as it should be, they're in control in regards to the quality of life that's really going to make a difference for them. So
now, are you both aware, for our North American listeners, that National Disability Insurance Scheme, the meaning of the word scheme might be a little bit different than Australia?
There's a few words we have that are a little bit different between Australia and North America, Jeff. Before we started this call, Rosie, I did say to Jeff, please don't use the word patient when you're talking about Australian aged and community care. It's a little bit of a pet hate down here. And, it's one of the things that I think I kind of struggled with quite a bit because, patient does kind of put you into that medical sort of diagnosis mode, which I think is something that we definitely would never want for our elderly or our disabled citizens. It's very much about seeing them as, members of our community, just like Rosie said, and, making sure that it's much more holistic in our approach to the care and services that they provide.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because I think that that's been one of the things that's really driven the development of Avivo as an organisation. So I was curious because I don't see myself as a health provider. Health is one of the outcomes. We very much see ourselves as being an organisation that supports people with many aspects of their lives. Health is important. It's almost it's a fundamental thing, but it's not. And then so many other things are important. We do see ourselves very much as a community support organisation that assists people to live their lives and working within many systems, which can be challenging, but necessary when you look at a whole person. They've got their health, their social networks, their education, employment, all those things make up a whole life. So that, is really important to us, and the language is important. So thanks for that, Annette.
Right. And you're more in the business of life care than just health care. So you were asking to me too, Jeff, about the origins of Avivo, and so as you said in the introduction, we're actually a West Australian organisation. So people who know Australia, we're only on the far west coast. That was going to be my next question: is where do you have a presence?
Yeah, Western Australia. We started here. At the moment, we feel there's enough work to work in Western Australia. And we've got no plans at this stage to become a worldwide organisation. We're very committed to the local roots of people here. We're a state, I don't know if people have looked on the map, but we're a massive geographical size, very, very large, and with a big city, Perth, down the bottom southwest corner in the more temperate areas, and then large a few regional towns, and then large areas that where there's country, many more Indigenous people, First Nation people, and so it's very low population in those areas, but very important populations too. So we work. Interestingly, we probably started out mainly working around Perth, and now we work in parts of regional Western Australia, but not all parts. So we work in the Midwest and also the Wheat Belt. But anyway, that's where we're based at the moment. That's where we focus our attention. Yeah.
And Annette, tell us a little bit more about you and your time at Baptist Care. I'm curious where Baptist Care is located in Australia, and how did you transition into the home health technology side of the business?
So Baptist Care, New South Wales and ACT is where we're based, so the opposite end for Rosie. And similar, we did a mixture of both aged care and disability services. I was actually there for 23 years, not 9. Which, still is amazing to me because it was sort of an industry I fell into, to be perfectly honest. I'd, finished university. I wasn't 100% sure where I was going. There was an opportunity in the local paper and started this role at Baptist Care. And then, the next 23 years just took me through so many different roles across both aged and disability care at both the corporate as well as an operational level. And it was just one of those things you fall into and you absolutely just love. And I think, what really was a driver for me is that you were getting to actually make a difference to the lives of so many people and then being inspired by all the people working in the industry. Because while it's definitely been a tough couple of years for the space with everything that's been going on down in here in Australia with some royal commissions, a pandemic thrown in because we didn't really have enough. But I think that, there's just this amazing amount of commitment and drive by so many people. And it just kept me focused on, getting things done. And when the going gets tough, I think it's a lot easier when you know that the work that you're doing is so important to the community. So after 23 years, I think this opportunity for AlayaCare came my way. And while I was a little bit hesitant at first, I thought, well, it's probably a good chance to do something a bit more broad across the space because technology was definitely one of the areas we had challenges with. So, I thought, great chance here. I can go and work with AlayaCare. Use the knowledge that I have in what it's like to actually be an end user and see where we can actually make a difference. And it's, been an amazing year and a half. And the bit I've actually enjoyed most is actually getting to interact with a lot more providers and seeing the different things come to play, which I think is a really good opportunity to ask Rosie about the model at Avivo, because I know as soon as I heard about it, it really excited me, and I loved that they'd taken something that, can be a little overwhelming, to be honest, from an Australian perspective because of the land size that we have here, and make it work. So, I'd love to hear from Rosie about their model and the difference it's made for her clients.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. So I suppose our organisation has always been really committed to being alongside people and providing that really practical support. So, as you said, we're made up of about 1,200 employees, which the great majority of those are people that work with people in the community. We use the term support workers, caregivers that are assisting people in many different ways, whether ranging from personal care, home help, helping to get out into the community, those really practical things. But also the role scope goes to also supporting people with the recovery, whether that's coming out of hospital due to a health condition or a mental health condition. So recovery and independence in a practical way, and also supporting people, it's interesting, through to maintaining or re-establishing connections and contributions to community. So the role of support workers is often really think, it's just a support work. When you really think about that whole realm of things that people are doing and being with customers, that's the word I'll use. It's a really diverse and incredibly important role. It's a role that makes it possible for many people to be able to live their lives. And I think it's very hidden in our community and undervalued. So for us, our thing, we've been on this, it's like, I can't say when did we decide to move to neighbourhood teams. It's actually been like an ongoing quest. There's been, so over all the years, you would have experienced this, Annette, you're continually looking about how can we do this better? And like all older organisations, Avivo is 50 years old, but we know we've been through the phases of what's happened with management and all that sort of thing. And we'd actually kind of created, as a fairly medium to large organisation, lots of hierarchy, lots of things that are based on controlling support workers' work and making decisions away from the customers. The things about all well-intended, but policies, procedures, delegations that had kind of really inhibited some of the ability for customers and the people that are working with them every day to make really sensible decisions about what matters. And and we've also, as an organisation, you did mention it. So we work across age, supporting elderly people in the community, people with disabilities in the community, and people with mental health issues in the community. We're lucky we don't have any facilities. Actually, that's one of the things that I really am so pleased as a CEO. We didn't have a lot of transition issues. Our infrastructure is a whole lot of amazing people who work in the community. So for us, we were sort of seeing this problem that we'd built an organisation with all these kind of well-intended hierarchies, delegations, issues of control, but it was actually hindering the quality of the service relationship. It can hinder. I won't go, it can be too extreme by saying that. There were some good things in it, but there's things that actually, a lot of things can be worked out much more sensibly between support workers and customers, and then just letting Avivo know. So this quest and a real commitment to seeing each person as a unique person and helping them live their lives has been ongoing. And it was really interesting. So this is going back probably 7-8 years ago. We started hearing about some of the things that were being done internationally. So I was introduced and heard about Buurtzorg, which you mentioned, and had the great privilege of going to Holland, and actually saw a number of organisations over there who had shifted their operating model to much more getting around teams, and teams having a greater level of autonomy or self-management, and working really closely at a local level for people to live their lives. And that really, but I have to say, it wasn't only Buurtzorg that inspired me. And my colleagues, we really looked out into the world to see this kind of trend about what was happening around much more innovative organisations and bringing choice and control and responsibility right down to the ground level. So that's what inspired us, and this sort of ongoing passion about how can we do this better. So I love the idea of local teams. So Buurtzorg is a whole network of neighbourhood teams throughout the Netherlands.
And if someone's wondering right now, it's BUURTZORG.
Yeah, that's right.
So let me ask you this then. You guys have sort of tweaked it for the Australian market. If I'm a new customer, bring me through how would my team be formed, and what would it look like?
So I'm going to say we didn't tweak it. We actually created our own design, and that's something I'd say to other organisations. So you can work with Buurtzorg, and they establish an agreement and work with them, and they are supporting organisations with to take their model into home and community services. So I just want to say that we learnt from Buurtzorg, and they were very generous with sharing their experience, and other organisations did too. What we did is developed our own model, so an approach, and we'll continue to do that. So I think, and actually that was the advice we got when we went to Holland, to actually don't just take what we've got. You're a different culture, you've got different history. They were a startup, so they started up that really fresh. Jos de Blok, who's the founder of Buurtzorg, it was a clean start. He'd moved out of other traditional organisations and started from the very beginning, creating a neighbourhood team where people had responsibility for the whole service to the people who lived in that community. Avivo is 50 years old. We had a lot of, I would say in some ways it's much more difficult because you're trying to transition. And anyway, so I just wanted to make that point. So going back to your question though, Jeff, is you were asking, weren't you, about what would be the experience? So there's two ways the way we've gone about it is actually we've had to transition to creating neighbourhood teams. So we thought it would be really easy. It wasn't. It's taken us 4 years to get to having just over 100 teams. We learned a lot along the way how we had to support we needed to do it in partnership with our colleagues and our customers. And you can't do, there's a real wish of project managing and doing to colleagues. We really had to get them, we learned a lot about people getting the will and the desire and having control to do this themselves. So there's a lot of consultation and involvement. Some people we needed to really be clear about why. And the why is that we wanted people to be able to make more decisions close to the customers. We wanted to improve the quality of the service that people were getting, and they'd know the people that they were visiting them. We wanted to then be able to work much more closely within the actual communities. So that why needed to be really clear for people. So going back again though, so what we've had a whole process, because what was previously happening is people were working across a whole region. If you think about it, they'd travel through many communities based on a roster to provide support to customers. They had their regular customers, but you would look at an area and you'd see people driving all over the place. Okay, so and there was no sense of team. So, if you look at a particular region, there would be 100 support workers working right across the particular region. And they might know some people, but otherwise they were pretty much reliant on their relationships through the office. So what we've done is created within each region a number of teams. You wouldn't say they are loosely based around a team size anything between 3 and 15. The larger the team, the more difficult it gets. And sometimes then when teams grow, we look at them splitting. So they kind of divide like amoeba into being focused more on a smaller geographical area. So you have to have a team size that's viable and actually can, between the group of people, provide the supports and services that people need within that community. So that's been the big transition for all the teams. So every support worker within Avivo now works within a neighbourhood team. And I'm going to just add another thing we ended up creating, because we were going completely for neighbourhood teams. And then we realised that some customers have such high levels of support, they just need their own team. So Avivo supports people right through from having a few hours of support a week, that might be home help or a bit of getting out or a check-in, through to people that actually need 24-hour support.
Right.
So we've actually realized with some people, it almost like some of those high support need customers, we really have seen that it's good to have a relationship with the neighborhood team, but you actually have a team that sits alongside that. So we've got a man who has 24-hour support, who is quadriplegic and dependent on technology for his breathing. He has his team, which includes about 12 support workers, and they sit in a particular locality, a suburb in Perth. Some of those support workers might do a little bit of work in that locality with the neighbourhood team, but the great majority of work is done with this man who has, awake overnight support, really active support whenever he does anything in the community because of his physical needs. Does that give you a bit of idea with the?
It's a very comforting idea that, it takes a village and everyone, from the carer side, you're also not frantically accepting shifts and driving to all kinds of different fee-for-service visits that, you've got big gaps in your day. I would imagine the logistics to set it up might be a challenge up front, but that it ends up being a win-win once the teams are in place.
Yeah, and we've still got a way to go. I mean, we've got all our teams in place, but they never remain the same because you get you lose some customers, people pass away, move on. Some people actually decide they don't like what we do, and then also you get a lot of you get growth. So so it's always move. It's never like, oh, we've got 100 teams. Oh, next week it changes a little bit with how that's going. But so we've got a long way to go. We're now actually, you mentioned in the beginning, we're actually now around about 75% of the work is now done with somebody's local team, whether that's a customer team or a neighborhood team. So that's a big shift we've seen from what you mentioned. We were in the 60%. Now we're way about, over 75% of their work is done within their team. And it does decrease the driving. But one of the real benefits that our colleagues have said is they actually have a sense of team. So they're not alone now. There's a much more sense of much more sense of colleagueship, and actually somebody else has got my back. And what naturally starts occurring, and we're wanting to get them, now they're all in place, is really focusing much more on the community and the community's needs, rather than, now if you're located in a suburb or a small country town, that real connection with who's who and what the customers are and potential customers and who you need to speak to, who the GPs are, all that sort of thing is where we can see the real potential developing over the next years. So they really talk about the sense of team. And we started out, Birtsorg is amazing. And when you look at it, their team started out with the sense they were primarily healthcare teams, so there's a bit of a difference. And they were also primarily they're made up of nursing staff. But there's a bit of a misconception there. Amongst that nursing team, it ranges through from registered nurses, equivalent to registered nurses, to people who are more like our certificate qualified, let's say. So they don't all have the same level of qualifications. So they started out right from the very beginning like that, and the level of autonomy that the teams had is really amazing and really good, and it's high. So they make a lot of decisions. We've got much more variety with the level of skills and qualifications that our team members have, and the level of autonomy is developing. So one of the things I would say to people looking at this, don't think self-management's black and white. It's a journey. You have to develop the capacity of the team to self-manage, not actually say, okay, off you go, you're self-managing and it will all work out, because you'll cause chaos. You have to do the groundwork. There's a lot of work to be able to effectively self-manage that you have to do on people taking personal responsibility for their development. So I think one of the things we made as a mistake, is early on we thought it was going to be easy for people to self-manage in teams. It isn't easy. You have to definitely do the work on developing the team and individual development to be able to really effectively work together as a team.
This is kind of a full flip though on the historical, isn't it, Rosie? Like when you think of aged and disability care of the past, before consumer-directed care really started to take off here in Australia, it was more systems, processes, bureaucratic. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do. Don't move out of these tasks. Here's the care plan. You can only do what's there. It was quite restrictive. And I don't know that we ever really empowered our staff, particularly at the support worker level. There was probably a lot more don'ts than there was do's. And, this whole model is turning that on its head. And you're wanting to empower all team members, whatever level or whatever skill they bring in, to genuinely engage with their customer and coming up with a solution that's actually going to meet the needs, as opposed to it being dictated sort of from the top down, which I think historically, and I think, Jeff, that's why the idea of the word patient doesn't really fit in nicely with this model, because it isn't just about, we're here to diagnose a particular problem and go through a series of steps.
Patient's a very reactive kind of term as well, right? Something's gone wrong and now you're a patient.
Right. And you're ill. And it's like there was another word, I don't remember, Annette. Remember the government used to call people in aged care recipients?
Yes.
So how inactive is that? You're a care recipient. They still do it.
They still do it. It's one of those words that can grate on you a little bit, because you don't. I think it's also not helpful to your team and your staff, because I think for me, if you're wanting to empower them and you're wanting them to see the person that they're working with as another person, they're not a patient who has a problem that you're trying to heal, particularly because of that whole medical idea. It's wanting to see them as someone who, just like you and I, are living their life, and what is it that we need to do to ensure that it's a high quality of life, despite the fact that they may have some health issues that they're working with. You want to ensure that their quality of life is optimized, but you can't do that without engaging them in that discussion and, giving them the ability to make that choice. Because we sort of touched on NDIS a little earlier on. We haven't yet talked about the introduction of CDC in the aged care space. So when Consumer Directed came in and, really wanted to flip aged care on its head, and it started in home care first before, now it's sort of starting to really get pushed a little bit more in residential as well. But home care was the sector that got to, play around with that to begin with. And it was completely different to how it had ever been before, because the funding no longer just goes to the provider and the provider made the decisions. All of a sudden the funding actually sits with the individual. So, they're told, here's your package of money. You get to choose with the provider of your choice how you're going to spend that money and how you're going to utilise it to ensure that you have a quality of life. So everything had to turn on its head, because historically the case managers, sadly, would just look at the assessment and almost make up the mind about what was going to be needed for that person before they even had a conversation with them. It was just off that first assessment, because you could read an assessment and go, yeah, okay, I can see that they've got this, this, this and this. That's quite different to sitting down and saying, okay, Jeff, tell me a little bit about you, what matters to you and what's going to genuinely bring you quality of life. And sure, we might tend to a wound that you have, which is, important, but that's not necessarily going to give you quality of life. And there's some phenomenal. Go, Rosie, sorry.
I was going to say, I think it's been one. No, I was going to, because I think one of the things, isn't it, when you only focus on the person's needs or the wound care, the reason for that's not, it's important to people, but actually what will bring joy to their life is the sort of how they're going to get out and visit friends, or how they're going to be able to get a job or go back to work. So it's actually what's one of the things, isn't it? Because I think a lot of needs-based work is about we decide what's important for people, where the question that goes alongside that is actually what's important to you, what matters to you, which it's about, when you ask them, sit down and, as you say, Annette, talk to people about what matters. It's not they want to be well, they want to be safe, but actually what brings joy in life is unique to every person. And that will be what gives them the will to do new things or, to get well. So we actually, one of the things I think we learned a lot of, we had the real privilege of working with a number of people who were very early on self-managing their funding, and seeing how they, as leaders, this is the customer or the patient, if you want to, or the participant, what they created for themselves around their lives and how they worked with their support team gave real inspiration for thinking how this is. So it's a bit like the challenge. Well, how do we create this for everyone? What's the sort of infrastructure as an organisation that it's not just for those people that are very resourceful who can set this up, but how do we develop a system and be an organisation that supports everybody to have this level of choice and control in their lives?
So I have to jump in with the outsider's obvious question. So I get it. So the government just gives me a check. There you go. I can go buy whatever care I want. How do you generally think it's working out with respect to people making the choices they should make for their own health?
So I think probably starting by it's not so much the funding is still overseen by someone. So just to ensure that obviously the government obviously puts in some limitations about what you can spend the money on and what you can't, but it's very, very broad. And the role of whether it's a case manager, support worker, there's many different titles that you can use, but the people that are helping to guide the decisions and that are kind of looking around, the goal, it's very much goal-based, goal planning around, well, what is it that you're wanting to achieve? But I think what's really great about it is that when you talk quality of life, I mean, obviously they're going to include basic things like, I might need assistance with showering, or, I might need someone to help me do my shopping. But you can actually take it this whole other level around what's genuinely going to bring them, true quality of life. So sometimes I think it's easy with these to think of it from a case study perspective. So the person who, really loves music, but because of their disability or because of, what's happened as they've gotten older, they no longer can necessarily engage directly with it themselves. But what could you do to bring some of that, that passion and that joy back into their life? And, often the customer, the client themselves can really lead down that path, but sometimes the amazing people they work with are the ones that come up with a potential solution to consider that might, bring some of that passion back. And I mean, there's so many amazing stories out there where the people that are working with them, they may not be able to give them the ability to play the piano again if they've got really bad arthritis, but there's so many particularly from a technology perspective now, there's so many great things out there that you can utilize other methods to bring some of that passion back. So I think that's the big difference that, this model is encouraging. It's encouraging innovation. It's encouraging, enablement and looking more broadly than just those basic ADLs that we all need done on our sort of day-to-day, Rosie.
Yeah. No. So I think it's a complicated answer. So Annette's described very well the real potential with the model of self-directed supports, especially if there's a system put in place that allows that creativity. So, sometimes you don't need a support worker to reconnect with music, but you might need a guitar and some technology. And so you want the system to be adaptable enough to be, but unfortunately, I will say this is unfortunately with the rollout, probably with the NDIS, there's a lot of commitment, but the implementation is quite restrictive. So I honestly actually feel there's a lot to be learnt for every country to look what's happened in Australia, the good and the bad, because there is a real tendency the government wants to keep control. So every now and again they talk about individual examples, a few people who've spent money on things they think are bad. Like one of the examples which was really inappropriately, the minister talked about people buying a yacht. Actually, I don't think anybody ended up saying, actually, nobody could find the person that bought a yacht. But, it was one of those things to say, look what people are doing. It's like, rah. I would have to say, actually, in the past, there was some real misuse of funds. If you look at organisations that were block funded. So, how come executives can get, expensive cars and all that sort of thing. But actually, anyway, I know. So I think it's interesting. So there are safeguards, but actually I think the danger of it sometimes is that particularly with the Commonwealth, they've probably got to being a bit too controlling about what people can have in their plans. And, we're seeing some interesting things happening at the moment that actually is decreasing choice and innovation. And I find that actually, I used to work with a state government with disability funding, and I used to find we had individualised funding, and there was much more flexibility than what we're currently experiencing with some of the stuff with the Commonwealth National Disability Insurance Scheme. They've also developed a system that's very fragmented. I mean, we have planners in the NDIAs. We have, they've got another separate organisation which is supposed to be support partners, local coordination. We've got they also are funding support coordinators who have to be in another organisation. Some people with disabilities are getting services and supports by multiple organisations, and it's not getting good outcomes. But actually, the systems created this. So with choice and control, there's also in a fragmented service system. I think there's some things that are leading to some pretty poor outcomes for some people. But I'm just painting. There's lots to be learnt. There's lots of good things. You're seeing that what the NDIS has given is much more equity, and a lot more people are getting support than what they used to. And there's been a real commitment to every person with a disability having a way, but they've also kind of fragmented the system. So, interesting. So I'm a much more of an advocate, of course, as you can probably hear. The more you've got to keep it really flexible, keep government out of making too many of the decisions, but with some good safeguards to make sure that the money is appropriately spent.
And for self-directed care, what are the eligibility requirements? My understanding is that not everyone is in the program, right?
So with NDIS, people do need to meet eligibility criteria, and they provide evidence in relation to the scheme. So they they have a disability that requires this support. So they have to go through a whole process of screening to get eligibility through to be eligible for the funding. So there's many people with disabilities that don't get access to the scheme because they haven't been able to demonstrate that they need this level of support. With aged care as well, isn't it, Annette, that people have to go through an assessment process, and there's assessment teams that they have to establish their need for access to community support, and along with that's right through from very low levels of support. So there is a pathway to be able to start with levels of support that might be only 1 or 2 hours of support to help with very practical tasks. They start with Commonwealth Home Support Program, and they ultimately can get assessment into home care packages. The only problem is we've got enormous waiting lists, so they can be assessed as eligible, but they can't actually get a package that's at the appropriate level. So we end up people which have really significant needs to be able to stay at home, and they've only got a few hours of support every week, and inadvertently end up in residential care when if only the system was much more flexible, they would have been able to stay at home with their family and support from the community a lot longer. So there's a lot of need for improving flexibility and access in the aged care system. Whereas I think
our government's definitely working through that right now. They're very aware that, there's waiting lists and the balance of the funding. I mean, because in the end, there's a pool of money that they've got access to, but there is a lot of pressure down here in Australia. And I imagine it's probably similar, in North America as well. I mean, COVID has not helped the issue around, the need to be keeping people home longer, because obviously residential didn't fare so well throughout the pandemic. So the government's definitely sort of flipping its viewpoint and looking at how it can continue to reduce that wait list. I mean, I think at one point for home care it was well over 120,000 people on the wait list waiting to access these self-funded packages. So a lot of them still were getting some lower level support through other funding, more block funding, but there was a number still waiting, and they're slowly making their way through that with the goal to, get to a point where anyone that needs care can access care. But it's a journey. Like as Rosie said, I think there's good parts about it. There's bits that definitely, if other countries were looking at this type of a model, you could learn from some of the mistakes that have occurred here in Australia. But I think overall, the notion that the person should be in control, of, the supports that they get is absolutely the way that it should be. And I think that the community model that Rosie was talking about tries to remove some of those barriers that exist, because there's no doubt that if there's too much bureaucracy and there's too many layers, you do stifle innovation, and it makes it much harder to be innovative. But a lot of providers are proving that there's, where there's a will, you can at least do your best with what's there.
Well, with the Uberization of everything and the amount of choices we have and control we have over everything, I definitely think this is going to be something that will continue to trend in other countries. We're almost up against our time, ladies. Why don't I get you both out of here on this? Annette, I'll start with you. And then Rosie, same question. Give us a reason to be optimistic about the future of care in the home.
Oh, look, I think that the reality is people want to stay at home. I mean, that's just, you can ask anybody. If you say, where do you want to age? Where do you want to live your last days? Everyone will say at home. So I think the fact that is where, the majority of us want to be, is fantastic. And I think it's something that we've got to hold on to. And I think it's something that, as whether it's our government that are looking at it, whether it's providers, we all should be doing what we can to make that a possibility. And despite all of the barriers, there's some amazing work being done there. There's some amazing people wanting to do work in this space. And look, we're all going to get there one day. So I think that we should all want it to be the best that it can be, and we've got to remain optimistic no matter what. But there's always more we can do, and we can find new ways, and we can find better ways.
Yeah, and I agree, Annette. I think actually people want to live at home. They want to be part of communities. I don't have an aspiration to, I'm going to end up in residential care. No, most people want to die at home and live life fully till the end of, through all those phases. And I think the other part of it, which I think we have got big challenges with it, but there's a real wish for community. So I think the hopefulness, and actually COVID has helped with some of this, is people realizing there's actually enormous potential within communities for coming up with ways of caring for each other. And, so I think that's the hopefulness. So I think the place, actually, the real contribution that elderly people with disabilities, home care, community support can provide is actually somehow how does that really interweave and support the development of whole communities to care for each other. Yeah, I think that's pretty exciting when we think like that.
Well, I'm definitely doing some mental gymnastics right now. The exciting things are, when you have this community-based care, it's also so much more comforting for the customer and the customer's, children that are usually the ones sort of figuring out how to order the services. And how great would it be to know that the care team is all geographically together, and they work as a team for their community members, and the sense of safety and security in that. And then from their vantage point, they, caregiver loneliness is an issue. And that is something that the Buurtzorg model helps address, and it helps those caregivers feel more like a valued member of the team, and they have colleagues that they work with together to provide the best outcomes to all the clients. Well, super, ladies. This was amazing, and I am so happy that we spent some time together here. Rosie, how can people find Avivo online?
You just need to search for Avivo Live Life. .org.au, and you'll find us there. And have a look at our website. There's some good stories around individual people. Some of the case studies, as Annette was referring, it's always good to always focus on the people and seeing how they live their lives. There's a wealth of experience there.
Good. And Annette, the sponsor of this episode is AlayaCare. So you can just go to alayacare.com. And when the borders open back up, I'm hoping to do a road trip in Australia. So I've got someone on the East Coast and someone on the West Coast I can stop in and see.
Yeah,
good. Sure can do. We'd love to have you one day.
All right, Rosie, Annette, nice to see you both. Take care for now.
No, thank you.
Now. Home Health 360 is presented by AlayaCare. First off, I want to thank our amazing guests and listeners. To get more episodes, you can go to alayacare.com/Home Health 360. That's spelled Home Health 360, or search Home Health 360 on any of your favorite podcasting platforms. The easiest way to stay up to date on our new shows is to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We also have a newsletter you can sign up for on alayacare.com/Home Health 360 to get alerts for new shows and more valuable content from AlayaCare right into your inbox. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.